5. Constructivism. The power of ideas and identity. 5.1. Emergence and core ideas. Constructivism emerged in the late 1980s as a bridge between rationalist, realist, liberal, and reflectivist critical approaches. It argues that international politics is socially constructed, shaped not only by material power, but also by ideas, norms, and identities. Alexander Wentz's famous statement, "Anarchy is what states make of it," 1992, encapsulates the view that anarchy does not determine behavior. Rather, states' interactions and shared meanings do. If states see each other as enemies, anarchy leads to conflict. If they see each other as partners, cooperation emerges. 5.2 Key concepts. Norms, shared expectations about appropriate behavior. E.g., human rights, non-use of nuclear weapons. Identity, how states define themselves and others. E.g., democracy versus autocracy. Socialization, the process through which states internalize norms. 5.3 Applications. Constructivism has been applied to explain phenomena such as the end of the Cold War, change in Soviet identity and norms, the spread of human rights regimes, the role of international organizations as norm entrepreneurs. E.g., UN-EU. 5. Critique. Skeptics argue that constructivism lacks predictive power and relies on interpretation rather than measurable data. Nonetheless, it provides valuable insights into how beliefs and norms evolve. 6. Feminist approaches to international relations. 6.1 Feminist critique of mainstream IR. Feminist IR scholars argue that traditional theories marginalize women's experiences and ignore gendered dimensions of power. Realism's focus on war, sovereignty, and rationality reflects a masculine worldview that valorizes aggression and competition. 6.2 Key perspectives. Liberal feminism advocates for women's inclusion in diplomacy, military, and decision-making institutions. Critical and post-colonial feminism exposes how global hierarchies intersect with gender, race, and class. Feminist security studies broadens the concept of security to include human security, sexual violence, and care work. 6.3 Contributions. Cynthia Enlow's Bananas, Beaches, and Bases, 1989, showed how everyday activities, tourism, military bases, domestic labor, are integral to global politics. Feminist scholars also highlight how wars affect women differently and how gendered assumptions shape policy decisions. 7. Post-colonialism and decolonial approaches. 7.1 Critique of Eurocentrism. Post-colonialism challenges IR's Western-centric narratives that portray Europe as the center of civilization and modernity. Scholars such as Edward Said Orientalism, 1978, revealed how Western discourse constructed the Orient as inferior, legitimizing imperial domination. 7.2 Key themes. Colonial legacies, persistent economic and political inequalities, rooted in colonial exploitation, epistemic violence, the suppression of non-Western knowledge systems, subaltern voices, recognition of marginalized perspectives in global politics. 7.3 Decolonizing IR. Post-colonial and decolonial scholars advocate for pluralizing IR theory, recognizing African, Asian, and indigenous worldviews that emphasize community, spirituality, and relationality, rather than state-centric competition. 8. The English School International Society. 8.1 Middle ground between realism and liberalism. The English School, represented by Hedley Bull, Martin White, and Barry Buzan, conceptualizes international relations as a society of states, not merely an anarchy. States share common rules, norms, and institutions, diplomacy, law, balance of power that sustain order. 8.2 Pluralists versus solidarists. Pluralists emphasize state sovereignty and non-intervention. Solidarists argue that shared values, human rights, humanitarian intervention, Justify collective action. 8.3 Legacy. The English school integrates power politics and moral order, providing a nuanced framework for analyzing global governance. 9. Contemporary approaches and global challenges. 9.1 Environmental and Green IR. Climate change has redefined security, highlighting issues such as environmental refugees, resource conflicts, and sustainable development. Green IR integrates ecological ethics into global politics. 9.2 Globalization and transnationalism. Traditional state-centric models struggle to explain the influence of multinational corporations, NGOs, and digital networks. Global governance theories emphasize multi-level and polycentric systems that transcend borders. 9.3 Post-structuralism. Post-structuralists like Michel Foucault and David Campbell analyze how language and discourse shape power. They argue that security narratives construct identities us versus them, which justify interventions or exclusions. 10. Methodological debates in IR. T.1 Positivism versus reflectivism. Positivists, neo-realists, neoliberals emphasize scientific methods, hypothesis testing, quantification, and prediction. Reflectivists, constructivists, feminists focus on interpretation, meaning, and context. 10.2 Levels of analysis. Individual level leaders' perceptions, psychology e.g. Hitler, Roosevelt, state-level regime type, domestic politics, systemic level structure of the international system. 10.3 Rational choice and game theory. Applied particularly in liberal and realist analyses, these models use strategic interaction to explain phenomena such as deterrence, alliance formation, and cooperation dilemmas e.g. Prisoner's Dilemma. 11. The Post-Cold War and 21st Century IR. The end of bipolarity in 1991 reshaped IR theory. Realism predicted instability due to U.S. dominance, while liberals foresaw democratic peace. Constructivists highlighted ideational change, and Marxists warned of neoliberal globalization's inequalities. In the 21st century, new challenges terrorism, cyber warfare, pandemics, and climate change demand multidimensional approaches. The rise of China, the war in Ukraine, and the crisis of multilateralism illustrate the enduring relevance of power politics, but also the limits of realism alone. The future of IR lies in theoretical pluralism, integrating material, ideational, and normative dimensions. 12. Conclusion. The study of international relations reflects humanity's continuous struggle to understand and manage power, conflict, and cooperation on a global scale. Realism teaches the necessity of prudence and the persistence of conflict. Liberalism offers hope for cooperation through institutions and democracy. Marxism exposes the economic underpinnings of inequality and imperialism. Constructivism reminds us that ideas, norms, and identities shape global order. Feminism and post-colonialism expand the moral and epistemic horizons of IR. By including marginalized voices, the English school integrates order and justice, power and morality. Together, these approaches enrich our understanding of a complex, interconnected, and ever-changing world. As global challenges multiply from climate change to digital warfare, IR scholars and practitioners must embrace pluralism, ethical reflection, and interdisciplinary thinking. The study of IR is not merely about explaining the world as it is, but about imagining what it could become.